Hello, everyone, and welcome to Democracy Demythologized. Today, I'm speaking with Susan Mazur-Stommen. She's an environmental anthropologist and owner of Indicia Consulting. So, she tries to understand energy consumption and how people use energy in order to try to figure out how to build better policies for both marginalized communities and to reduce our environmental footprint. She's done a lot of research in this space, and we talk about two things. We talk about what happens since basically all the funding cuts that have been going on in the United States in 2025 and how that's impacting environmental research. And we kind of go back to basics and try to figure out how to build a more effective system as a society to both relate to nature and try to build a better world, and then how to enact that in our current environment here in 2025. So I hope you enjoy. Hello, everyone. I'm here with Dr. Susan Mazur-Stommen. Susan, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. So it's been a while since you and I talked. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, though it's a little bit weird for me because you and I, we used to work together. You used to be my boss many, many years ago. So I know exactly who you are, but it might be helpful to describe to everyone else. Maybe could you discuss what you do?
Sure. So first of all, I am a cultural anthropologist, and that means I study people. And as a cultural anthropologist, I got my PhD from UC Riverside in 2002. My original dissertation had been on historic preservation and gentrification in the former East Germany. So I've been interested in sustainability in the built environment for a very long time. I am what's called a practicing anthropologist because I support myself with my own firm, which is Indicia Consulting. And yes, you had reached out to me several years ago, I want to say 2018 maybe, and it just happened to work and coincide with a period where I had some perfect projects for us to work together on. And that was a lot of fun. And a lot of that stuff is still up on our website on indiciaconsulting.com, where people can go and find lots of free resources. People who listen to you are also welcome to link into me. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and there's also resources, PowerPoints, papers, things that we might talk about that people might be interested in are also available on LinkedIn.
Yeah, definitely. And I can include some of these links in the description below. I have a whole other website where I also have kind of cross-published some of this stuff because we did work from way back in the day. Do you want to maybe talk about what you've been up to lately?
Sure. So about since 2018, and I do believe you worked on at least one of these projects, I have been mostly working with Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratories on a portfolio of projects related to climate change, heat resilience, and disadvantaged communities, where we have gone to Boston, Atlanta, Fresno, Oakland. I'm trying to think if there's possibly a few more cities I'm forgetting. And we've had 3 or 4 different related projects through the lab that have been multimodal in the sense of they've been both qualitative and quantitative, with engineers and anthropologists working together, and also working with what are called CBOs, or community-based organizations, in each of these cities. And so my part of this has been to go in and conduct primarily interviews, in-depth interviews, also known as IDIs, focus groups in both English and Spanish, and sometimes working on surveys, and then in-home energy audits oftentimes are also giving us some qualitative data. So I have been working on that, and we are wrapping the last project of that portfolio this coming September. And I'm happy to talk about what's happened since January, if that's something that you're interested in.
Yeah, let's go into that. Yeah, what does this last year look like?
Well, it's been rocky. One of the first things that happened was in January, we were working on one of the projects that had already wrapped, but we were prepared to publish in peer review. And we were really down to, the nitty gritty, the last couple of, deleting spaces and polishing. And unfortunately, I would say part of the blame lies on my colleagues who can be a little bit perfectionist, and they really just didn't see the need for speed, I'd say. And so we got caught up after the inauguration was a full stop, based on the fact that, again, working with disadvantaged communities, Latino, Black, Asian immigrants, very much not on this administration's interest, and very much on their radar. So we were told to fully stop work. And luckily, like I said, that project is already wrapped. So while it is unfortunate that this currently will not be published in a peer-reviewed journal, I believe most of that work is still available. Again, some of it's on my website, some of it's on probably the lab's website. So it did get out there, but yes, they absolutely put the kibosh on that. And then similarly, we've had to tread really carefully with the remaining project. There has been, we've been monitoring it. We have been told, you can or cannot do X, Y, and Z. Working with the community-based organization, in this case, has a Spanish name, so they don't like that. And we've been told, we can't work with them. And so it's been very intrusive. We have, like I said, been, told to slow, stop, or trash work that was already in progress or completed due to this administration.
Yeah, this really stinks. And it seems like, to be able to have work and say, either the publishing of it is pretty nebulous or you're going to have to completely cut it entirely. How has all this felt?
Well, I can't say I was really taken by surprise. So just to go back to 2016, one of the things that happened in 2016 is I actually was asked to speak about what might be the Trump administration impact on environmental science and studies at that time. And I did actually talk, including to folks in Brazil. I had, at that time, I was also the national vice president of Eco Women, which is an organization dedicated to promoting women's careers in the environmental sphere. They are a wonderful organization. They are still busy, and you can find them on LinkedIn and elsewhere. And so I was prepared in that sense. I also was working at the time for Goucher College in the environmental studies department, and that was a new program. It had just been accredited in, I want to say 2014 or 2015. So I had started teaching in, I believe, 2015. And when Trump was elected for the first time, it was pretty clear that a lot of environmental studies were going to be under scrutiny, and we saw that with that program. It really never got off the ground because marketing it, was difficult. People were not necessarily looking to start a career in environmental sciences or studies under those auspices. And so unfortunately, I believe the last time I taught there was 2019, and it died on the vine. So there have been a lot of pretty scarring incidents if you work in this space over the last 10 years or so. It's been rough.
Yeah, this makes sense. What impact do you think this, so maybe for context for any viewer, a lot of your research and a lot of your work is contracted with the government. So this is why funding prerogatives are very key. And, you know, maybe what's the kind of the lay of the land for the wider like set of, you know, we'll say environmental contractor space, that kind of ecosystem in DC and the US overall.
Well, it'll be interesting. First of all, it's bad. I think it's generally bad. One concern that people have, you mentioned this a little, you alluded to this in our back and forth on email, but I will bring this up because it is actually a concern. Number one, they've actually sent the FBI around to talk to climate scientists who've received funding under contracts with the federal government, essentially seeking to accuse them of fraud and claw back the money. And this is the really scary thing for people like myself, who was just a one-person shop. Small woman-owned business. I mean, that money is not only not just my money, it goes to people like, you worked on a project, we have other folks working on projects. Most of that money goes to, expenses and labor and just what you need to run a business. So there's no money. And if they come back to me and say something like, well, you got $70,000 from this project, we want it back, there's no way I can give that money back. I mean, I would be then on having court cases and, possibly go to jail, because they've simply decided that with the power of the federal government that they can yank money back. And they've done that. They have done that. I mean, they did that with NYCHA, New York City Housing Authority. My understanding is they had, I don't know, many tens of millions of dollars already, distributed in a bank account with Citibank in New York. And the Trump administration just yanked it back. And so if they can do that to something like NYCHA, what do you think they can do to me?
Yeah, this makes total sense. And it, I like even if it ultimately proves to be unfounded, I bet the legal fees in and of itself would be pretty prohibitive to actually address this kind of scenario in itself. It reminds me of, I mean, I remember, I'm blanking on her name at the top of my head, but there is a woman from the Philippines who was arrested, a journalist arrested under under Duterte, under his regime many years ago. She has since been released, and I believe she's actually a professor at Columbia University, but and has won the Nobel Peace Prize. But basically, she talked about how like Duterte came after her because the mentality was, I'm gonna, he would go after one, like authoritarian, like basically going after like a couple people and trying to kind of destroy them as a way to spread fear and make everyone else think, okay, but what if they come after me? What if they come after me? And it seems like a parallel here, maybe going after a pretty prominent climate organization in New York to kind of make everyone afraid, or what do you think?
Well, they're definitely doing that. So remember, NYCHA is housing; it's not climate. But NYCHA, I would that's an example. Because every contract with the federal or state contract usually has clawback language, and basically it's usually things like if you are accused of turpitude, or if you embezzle money or get caught flashing somebody, they'll take your money back. And in fact, they always do audit you. I think people don't realize what the margins are for this type of work. I mean, you don't go into environmental work because you're going to make a ton of money. And so the very little money that we're already making, is oftentimes on that knife's edge. I mean, one of the projects I think you worked on actually with me, was state of California funded, and they did do an audit, and there was some fear there at one point where they would just be like, we can just take back $10,000, 2 years after the project's closed. And so when you live like this, it becomes extra scary knowing that there's a malicious actor who's really interested in destroying your career and your livelihood, simply because you're actually trying to save the world. You're trying to work on something good, and these people come along and they're, literally criminals, and they're interested in, stealing your money back. And so, yes, I do think that they are trying to silence people by picking on individuals. I haven't seen anybody reporting that I know of yet that they've had any type of meetings with anybody yet. But I'm sure it's happened. I just don't know of anybody specific.
Right. And I wonder if there is investigation, how many, if some of those people, if people are being investigated, or if organizations are being investigated, if any of them choose to be quiet for the sake of their legal safety, because that can be common in any type of court proceeding, that you don't talk about it publicly, that maybe they're keeping it on the hush hush because that for their own safety. Yeah. Do you
I do think that's true.
You go.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, do you have a sense for, it seems like with this housing, and I know housing is different from climate, but that they're going after a bit of a larger organization. And in some cases, there's definitely some high profile cases, like Harvard is on the news, which is an extremely large organization. Do you have a sense if they're disproportionately going after bigger players, middle players, or little players? Because there's tons of little consulting organizations like you guys.
Yeah, I think it's mostly starting at the top. I mean, I think here's what scares me though. The scary part is, of course, Doge got in there and they got everybody's data. And my guess is that somebody out there most of them are adults. They're all like 19. And as we know, they didn't go to college. I wouldn't trust them to babysit my dog, which I don't have, but there might be somebody actually who's good at machine learning. And I'm kind of afraid that they will go with, using machine learning or an LLM and go through all those contracts and then find small people and then just, issue some type of, bench warrant, subpoena, you know what I mean? Like they could possibly automate that when they get to the small people. Right now, I think it's mostly the big players. I think they're enjoying having somebody like Harvard or UCLA on the ropes and scaring them and throwing around numbers like $500 million. But I don't think that means that people who are small or medium-sized are off the hook. I definitely think they'll get around to us eventually.
Yeah, this makes sense. I mean, this is scary. And on the machine learning side, I mean, I think another side of it is it can be very easy, whether I would consider what I'm about to say good or not, it could be very easy to come up with a very annoying machine learning algorithm. I mean, you have that saying that someone's like, I'm good enough to do a lot of damage, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So like you can build a machine. So I'll pick a slightly different example, which is anti-fraud, which probably from their perspective, this would all fit within. So it's actually not that different, but you can build an algorithm that detects fraud and but if you build it, and it can be in some ways super accurate, but it's going to be, in the fancy words, it's going to be overfit. It's going to be hyper specific, and it often will pick up criteria that are very weird or problematic, organizations that have Spanish get marked as fraud. Because of the way that the data that they use, these kind of things are very common when you build a rudimentary machine learning algorithm. And the horribleness of it is they can be super effective in a certain sense. I don't know if I would use the word good for them, but they can be they can
serve a purpose that bad actors are seeking for them to serve, which is harassment and pulling people out, for scrutiny, even if it is on flimsy or non-viable reasons. They can, like you said, do a lot of damage with and it's clear. Can you talk a little bit about overfitting? Because People have been joking online, particularly Blue Sky, that, it's clear Elon Musk has no idea what he's talking about. And he definitely does not understand models. And so he doesn't understand, like, he's got Grok, and, can you just describe what overfit means for lay people? Because I think that's a term that's getting out there and people don't know what that means.
Yeah. So overfitting is being too specific to the point that you make mistakes. And so a good example, because remember, computers are very literal, might be that you think of a good, like, not super controversial example. So say you have...
Go with produce.
Yeah, that's where my mind was. I was going to say you have something that's identifying, well, it's similar to produce, but slightly different. So say you have something that's identifying a fruit. What's your favorite fruit?
Let's go with mango.
Okay, what's your second favorite fruit?
Grapes.
Great. So you got pictures of mangoes and pictures of grapes, and you want to figure out which one. So your model is figuring out, this is a picture of a grape, this is a picture, or of grapes, this is a picture of a mango. So say, for the sake of argument, that, like, all your pictures of, like the one store sells grapes and doesn't sell mangoes, and the other store sells mangoes. Well, you're gonna like it might identify features to say this must mean it's grapes, but, like, it might look at the background of the video, or of the picture, and conclude, okay, this design, this store, because it might be able to tell, like, this color scheme is associated with this store, and be able to, tell the different patterns. It'll say this store is more, like, the fact that it's in this store means it's more likely to be grapes, and then the fact that it's in this store means it's more likely to be mangoes. Well, that actually might work if I sent, or if you sent, I guess in this case you're the person, but whoever sent them a bunch of pictures about, from their local 2 grocery stores. One was of grapes, one was of mangoes. But obviously, if you then try to tell the difference anywhere else in any other environment, that's going to break down.
Yeah. You're going to get also people, you might actually have it being like, oh, that mango is just a tiny grape. And then, like, it's going to start being like, I can put these mangoes together in a grape, format, and they'll be all, like, little tiny mangoes, but they look like grapes. You know what I mean? Like, there's all this sort of interesting shenanigans that could happen.
That's a good generative AI example, because this is what happens when you take what I just described and kind of do it in reverse, which is what generative AI does. Yeah, so use these ideas to produce things rather than to just purely ascertain this or this. But yeah, like, and you might get this. You get this with, like, okay, so you're trying to tell the difference between deer and dogs, and a lot of your pictures of dogs are indoors because many people keep their dogs indoors. That's what happens with pets. But deer are pretty much always out in the field or the woods or something. So it learns to figure out, okay, the woods and the field tend to be associated. So then it's more likely. So you take a picture of your dog while you're going on a hike, and then suddenly it concludes it's a deer.
It's sort of like overcorrelation. It's basically saying, you know what I mean? Like, it's saying, like, correlation. We always say correlation is not causation, but in this case, they're saying, oh, it's a tawny, 4-legged. It's got these features, and I see trees, deer, and you could be like, oh, it's actually a German Shepherd. There's a saying that I like, and one of my professors actually took it one step further, and it's very germane to what we're talking about right now. Knowledge is knowing tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to use it in a fruit salad. And then he added, but creativity is going ahead and using it in a fruit salad anyway, right? Like, and so I like that, because it is, and some of the things that I think both you and I work on is a combination of taking facts or data and turning them into actually usable information, right? And that's the trick, is that you really do need human wisdom to analyze and interpret data. data is itself not neutral. It's not, how you've collected the data, where it came from, who put it in first, how did they trim it, what got left on the cutting room floor. All of those things introduce bias at different times. And if you are the person who's been in charge of this whole product line, from A to Z, you will know, hopefully, where those biases are introducing and introduce ways to combat bias. But that is 100% not what those people are doing when they are just using like an LLM or, machine learning to do, sorting out mangoes and grapes and tomatoes. So yeah, it's kind of scary because people will just essentially let the machine run, and then whatever the machine outputs, there's no check. There's no human check.
Yeah, exactly. And real quick with the saying it's like over correlation, you're exactly right. I think they use the word overfit instead, just because it's less syllables. It's easier to say, but it is precisely over correlation. In another context, sometimes people will say over specification, but don't worry about that. That's also harder to say. Overfits is a lot easier. With that saying, I might also add, and anthropologists show that there isn't really fruit anyways. Every society has their own fruit or something like that.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I was just, whatever you define, though I will say actually that as an anthropologist, I do think that most experts in a language or culture who are domain experts, for example, on like, let's say produce or plants or botany, in their language, I know we have research that suggests they come very close to binomial nomenclature. And it does actually, we seem to manage as humans to coalesce around a good defined, good definition for these things. That said, and I do love this because there's all sorts of weird things out there in nature. Like people don't really have a good definition of water, of trees. Trees aren't really defined. Like what's a shrub versus a tree? And of zero. Like zero has magical properties. You know what I mean? Like there are mysteries out there in the universe. And what is a tomato? Is it a fruit? And you can get people. Why would we call it a fruit? Well, it's got ovaries and seeds and da-da-da-da. You can kind of go down this, but for most people's everyday use, tomato is a vegetable, so it's just one of those interesting things. Like we can get obviously as anthropologists into this area about cultural domains and building taxonomies and, sets of contrasts. And that's very much a lot of where my work is where I tend to land, is kind of in that vicinity, which is one reason why it worked so well when we did some of the machine learning stuff that we did.
Yeah, I think this was an exciting part of what you're doing. And I have also read things about like trees are actually a nebulously defined concept and a number of these. If you've ever had a heated discussion with someone about what a sandwich is, it's like it can be, oh my gosh, there's actually can be a lot of hidden complexity there. But like, I guess it might be helpful to talk through on the last thing you said about like for you, you're obviously living in a time where a little bit of a turbulent time for your kind of work, but like what would the ideal look like? Like how do you think what do you think it would look like for an actual like enabling governmental administration to try to look at and do this and help do this type of environmental work?
Wow, that's a great question because it really takes us back to first principles. Number one, I really think we have to, we can look at this situation that we're in right now and be like, it's dire. Yes, it is. But that also doesn't mean that there isn't fertility and potential and possibilities and opportunities. And I think there is that out there. Number one, back to you had asked earlier a question about sort of the lay of the land. And I will say, there's a lot of churn. Like I'm on LinkedIn right now, and it seems like there's actually a lot of hiring. People are also kind of taking advantage of this sudden kind of letting loose of all of these experts, and they're being snapped up. So I know that, and that doesn't mean that everybody's having a wonderful time and that some people are struggling to find work, but I am seeing a lot of jobs, and sometimes churn can oxygenate, that environment. And so I feel like there may be some possible good things that come out of that. So too, I think with people realizing so many ways in which their lives are connected to governance, we may be able to talk to people on a level where we can get some traction on things like, I think the very first thing we need to go back to is a constitution that recognizes full bodily autonomy, right? And what would that look like? If my body is sacrosanct and you cannot make decisions about my body without my consent, like that really changes like the legal system, the carceral system, gender relations, marriage models, like everything comes back to, power and control and, and freedom and autonomy. And so I feel like, first of all, we need to sort that out because a lot of people are being treated very poorly in terms of their ability to control their own bodies, whether that is moving through space or going to the bathroom or, dyeing their hair pink. There's people out there who, for some reason, believe that they have control over other human beings. And I think we have got to get to this point where we recognize and respect and honor other people's, personhood. And then once we have that, we have a sense that we can support people. We have the money. We have the infrastructure. We have the capability. Everybody can have healthcare and education and, and housing. And I mean, really handling those basic things, I think, would go a long way. And then from there, we can start talking about, and so as we go along this path, for example, just today, I read the UN was trying to do something about plastics again. And the 4 countries that voted against it were the United States, Russia, Malaysia, and Saudi Arabia, because they make money from fossil fuels turning into plastics. It's $1 trillion business, and we don't want. And so what those 4 countries said was, we just need to get better at recycling. Well, no, it's reduce, reuse, recycle. Recycle is last for a reason, because it's not good. It's the last thing you should be doing. The first thing you should be doing is reducing your consumption. And we are in a perfect position to do that, right? I mean, all of the clean energy technologies are fairly mature. We know that they're doing really well. They're employing people. We have life cycle analyses that, show the disparities between the impact of fossil fuels versus clean energy. So I think really it does come back to, we need to deal with this problem where some people out there feel like they deserve to control other people down to what they are putting in their bodies or putting on their bodies, or how they're maneuvering through time and space. Really basic stuff, and we have got to get rid of that and truly fundamentally support people's ability to live and survive and thrive. And then I think at that point we can start to really work on environmental big picture issues.
Yeah, this makes total sense. One specific thing this reminds me of. So I a couple weeks ago I was in Samoa, and when I was in the capital, actually I had just landed from the airport and I was taking a shuttle to my hotel, and the person sitting next to me was a gentleman from, and I believe I'm not pronouncing the country correctly, so I almost apologize if I'm not, but from Vanuatu, which is another kind of Pacific island country. And he actually worked in the plastics department of the main kind of environmental department of the government. And he had come there because they were planning, they had a conference, various Pacific islands had a conference to basically plan how to go to Geneva and talk about these issues at the UN. So they had this upcoming meeting and they were strategizing how to go about it. It was probably the one that got voted down. So maybe this was all. Yeah.
I'm not sure that it got. I don't know where it went. I won't say necessarily voted down. I'd say voted against. I don't know where it is in the pipeline. Like, I don't know if they get it over. I just know that the 4 countries voted against it.
Okay. Yeah. When you said the U.S. voted against, when you said, I was like, oh no, because some things the U.S. has that full veto over, and I don't know. The UN is complicated.
Security Council, yeah, but I don't think this is Security Council, so I don't think it's an automatic this. But it may be.
Right. But he was talking about the ocean plastic. So like a lot of they're getting these both plastic, like pollution around their waters and the formation of those giant
islands, yeah.
Those giant, I mean, some of them in some parts of the world are almost as large as whole US states. It's just plastic like minefield in the ocean. And they had like recently legalized plastic bags, which was like a big deal in Vanuatu because they sensed that this was contributing to that, because a lot of the stuff and some of the island countries, I think they have unique needs because both, you have all the other countries contributing to their environmental problems, but also, they have less space to put things in landfills. So a lot of the stuff ends up almost more likely getting put out to the ocean. But I wonder, it seems like, I think it's interesting to connect, I think, the environmental work as coming out of a form of body autonomy, like you're saying. It makes sense. It's interesting because I sometimes I view the environment as a type of relationship, and sometimes people will say like it's my body, my choice, and then we'll advocate for things that do prove harmful for the environment, like maybe like applying things or consuming things that are difficult. But it seems like it's a wider relationship system. Or am I off in how you're thinking about it? Or yeah.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think you're on to something. To that example, let's talk about that for a second, because a lot of people are very afraid that someone's going to come in like an environmentalist and be like, no, you're not allowed to have X, Y, and Z. And I mean, I remember talking with somebody back when I still worked at the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy. There was this wonderful guy. I ended up becoming good friends with him. Physicist, worked for the government, Quaker, vegan, bicycles everywhere. And he wanted to ban anything over 100 HP, I think. It was like anything over like essentially a 2-stroke engine. And I was like, well, congratulations. You've just invented the largest black market the world has ever known, because just going and banning stuff is not the way to do it. You know what I mean? Like I am a big fan. So when we worked with when we had our nonprofit arm, we were working on plastic straws. And our goal was to actually do the initial research. There's a lot of bullshit out there about plastic straws. And unfortunately, it's really given people who are pro-plastic straws, which is a weird thing, a lot of ammunition, because everybody was just like, oh, turtles are getting them up their nose and ban them. And it really comes back to, we just don't know. Like, we do not know how many straws are out there, and the numbers that people put are wild. And it turns out most of them are actually some 8-year-old. I am not joking. There's an 8-year-old out there who did like a school project and wrote like 8 trillion straws a year, and then everybody just ran with it. So we were trying to get to the bottom of it as ethnographers and find out what were people's relationship with straws. And for example, a lot of people who are disabled are like, I can't use a paper straw. I can't use a metal straw or a glass straw for various reasons. And important to know, so I'm not in favor of just banning things. I am definitely in favor of understanding people's relationships with the object, whether it's a car or a plastic straw or an unsafe sunscreen. Now there's this creepy, they're going against sunscreen now. You know that? Like, it's one thing to be like, oh, I really wish the government wouldn't tell me what sunscreen to wear. Okay, fair, maybe, I guess. But now they're just like, yeah, slap some beef tallow on my back. and I'm good to go. And so that kind of thing, I guess I personally would be like, okay. I mean, when I'm old, I'm 57, and I've been around doing this work for a long time, like roughly 35 years. And so 1990-ish, 89, California is one of the first places to do motorcycle helmet laws. And my friends in Silicon Valley, many engineers, were libertarians, and they were so upset about this. They were just like, how dare somebody tell me I have to wear a helmet? And I said, well, your brain comes in contact with the asphalt, and somebody's got to scrape you up, and that's kind of unfair to our first responders, or anybody who comes. I mean, what do you want us to do? Like, you don't wear a helmet, we just toss you in the ditch? No, there's a whole complex that kicks in. Ambulance is called, cops have to come and deal with you. You're taken to the hospital. There's a whole ER for you. People are desperately trying to save your life, and your brain is mush because you didn't wear a helmet. These guys were so bonkers about it. Of course, they didn't have any problem with like canceling smoking because they don't like smoking. They were like, oh yeah, it's great that you have to walk 3 miles to have a cigarette, but I shouldn't have to wear a helmet. I do not know what we do as humans with other humans on this particular type of behavior where people just get squirrely about being told what to do. But I do think part of it is positive feedback, positive reinforcement is the only thing that works. And so trying to give people as many choices as you can, like with a toddler, you don't go eat your vegetables or you're going to your room. You say, you can have peas or carrots. Which one do you choose? And you don't let them out without making a choice, And the kids will pick one and move on with your life. So offering choices to people, not banning things, keeping it positive, trying to like reinforce things with incentives and rewards. I think this is where we go in a sane world. All right, now we're not in a sane world, but your question was sort of directed in an ideal world, what would we do? And to me, that's where we would start. Is we would start where people are at, and we would not ban things, and we would not be punitive, and we would not yell at people, which most people don't do anyway. That's just a mom made up thing. But we would. But the plastic straws did get banned. Just like you're talking about plastic bags.
So my skull
and plastic bags and straws.
And that kind of impact, that's exactly what the helmet is.
They get everywhere. You probably just don't really need them or don't need as many of them. But honestly, we just don't know. We don't know what the life cycle impacts are all the time. We don't know what their full distribution is. We don't know what the quantity is. We really, truly don't know about how they degrade. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of questions.
Yeah, I was dead or had a very severe form of brain cancer. Yeah, not brain cancer. I'm sorry. Of some kind of brain. Yeah, so there you go. Helmets are super important. Wear helmets.
I mean, wear a helmet. When I horseback ride, when I see people not wearing helmets, it just really like upsets me because I've fallen off of so many horses. You know what I mean? Like I've been Simone. And
a third story that was going to connect back. So the one was I was talking recently to someone with a woman from Barcelona, and she was talking about from her perspective, and this is a whole complex thing. I'm not an expert on EU policy with regard to any of this, but or Spain or Barcelona in particular, but like from her perspective. She has gotten very frustrated with a lot of the recent legislation around like electric vehicles. And so basically what they're doing is they'll like what she said, and this is all like her account basically, like it's you can basically if you have a certain type of gas car, you can basically just get pulled over and now your car is something that they can give you a ticket for, or during certain times of day you can only ride on certain highways if you have an electric vehicle. So like she was like, if I wanted to go from here to there, if I had my original car, like I can't go there, except at night or something. She's like, but I have to go all the way around because the alternate road is like 3 times as far. And she's like, so then I emit more. But anyways, she basically, from her perspective, she's like, she's like, they passed the laws, and then every maybe 2 years later, like every couple years, they re-regulate, and they're like, no, this type of electric car is no longer fine. And so she's like, should we just go get a new car? Like, she's like, I can't do that. Like, I can't do that whenever the law changes. And the details of this is one person's perspective. I don't know the details of these laws, but I think the wider theme I was thinking about with this, and this is what you were talking about at the end, is that a stick-based approach. I mean, for a carrot and a stick-based approach, I just don't think works. It leads to people feeling angry, but it also like it disproportionately hurts people who are less well off. Like in that society,
let's take your example, because your example is actually not really a stick. I mean, they are basically saying, like, you do have choices. You can take the shitty road, which is just, it's still there. I mean, it's a road, or you can take, it's an incentive, right? She thinks of it as a stick because she doesn't have but it's really an incentive for the electric car. That said, I think what you're getting to a little bit is means testing. And so when we introduce policies and we means test them, so we'll say things like, okay, but you must be making under $40,000 a year, and then we'll give you this grant or with a subsidy or this privilege. When we make people jump through hoops, and because that's what that is, right? Somebody's gonna have to come in and prove not only like I only make 40,000, but we usually go into things like, oh, you don't have like a secret Swiss bank account, you know? And I will give a more relevant environmental example in just a second. But I think when we means test policies, it's kind of the but of policies. We want to have these policies, but we are chicken shit. And so we are going to be like, but we're going to like add in all of these little obstacles and make people like run around. And then in the end, you're going to get a Mississippi situation where like 91% of welfare recipients are denied. I'm not kidding you. And this is several years ago, so I'm sure it's worse. 91 of welfare recipients denied. And Mississippi is, I'm sorry, what? The poorest state in the country. I mean, I think it's even worse than where I live, which is West Virginia. So, unbelievable stuff that they can do with means testing. I'll give you another example from our research. So one thing that we came up with was, and a lot of this is why our research is good and why they don't like it, is because we end up saying things like, give people money, trust people. So a lot of kids don't always spend the summers when school's out at their normal home. They may go to relatives, they may go to summer camp, or they may, you know what I mean? They may stay with grandma on the couch a lot of the time. And what you'll find is whoever they're staying with, their energy costs go up. And so grandma's energy costs, she's got 3 kids now watching TV all day, playing on their Nintendos, whatever. And her energy costs are going up, and she's already on a limited income. So she can't go and say to LIHEAP and say, well, I actually have these kids because they are registered with the school district in a different house. So they are not her residents and they're not in her county or whatever. And then we said, why don't you just do something where you can register them through a summer reading program at the library? And then we take those kids, and anybody who's in that summer reading program for that summer, they're assigned to this household, this county. And then grandma can take that summer reading program enrollment form to LIHEAP and say, my kids are with me for the summer. Here's my basic proof that she jumped through a hoop. And you've really got a nice win-win situation, right? You've got the kids enrolled in a summer reading program. You have them going to the library, which is going to be cool and comfortable when it's dangerous outside. And you've got grandma getting a subsidy for taking care of the kids, which we want them to do. So we can come up with some of these by going into the communities and like talking to people and observing what they're actually doing in their homes and with their lives and their kin and their family. We can come up with reasonable solutions that don't require a lot of necessarily new money or complicated workarounds. They really are just about reducing the barriers to access for people who really need help.
Mm. Yeah, this makes total sense. I mean, it seems like I could definitely see the value of that. Part of me actually wonders if in my family growing up, if my parents enrolled me in things for similar reasons. I think my mom actually had a somewhat similar circumstance, or related to my parents getting divorced, and I would be we lived in two different school districts for a time, and one parent claimed us, yada yada yada. But yeah, I guess, how do you think, based off of your experience working on the policy level, working with government for and other like private corporations and stuff, how do you think this stuff gets built? Like, part of me, I know that's a bit of a broad question, but part of me is also thinking about how like the constant shift of like difficulties passing legislation seem to kind of like promote this type of, okay, you have this wide sweeping legislation, we can't just pass a new legislation because Congress is not being a legislative body right now. So you make changes, or you make new legislation by poking tons of holes, and these things kind of get built over time. Or what do you think, or how does this get built in this kind of in the landscape?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, right now, I don't know. I mean, well, I'll say this. So one of the interesting things was, sometimes when you can recognize something's like good and an accomplishment and an achievement, but still have your issues with it. And mine was Biden's IRA. And my problem was, he didn't really go to anybody like me and talk. I mean, I was not included in anything like that. And it may sound arrogant to say like I should be included in that, but I was writing for the Obama website, you know what I mean? Like the White House website. I am a person who's, like you said, I'm involved at the state and federal level. I do help drive policy. I have testified with bright pink hair in Maryland in front of then Governor O'Malley. That was a little bit surprised. I was like, oh, well, didn't know I was going to be doing that. But, I am one of those people. I've been cited in like Pennsylvania for when they make decisions about, the Public Utilities Commission. And so, yeah, they should have asked me, and I would have gone over some of the problems with that. And now, to your point about poking holes in things, is big, sweeping, fantastic, accomplished, thing that is going to be riddled with problems, and nobody really understood it, or really, outside of the folks who were sort of specialists in that, nobody got it. It was an amazing legislative achievement, and yet, you've got this problem where people just don't know why it's there, or what it's doing for them, or why they should care. And I know people always say things like, oh, we should get better at messaging, and other people say like, oh, people are just, idiots, and it doesn't really matter what you say. Neither of those is completely true, right? I mean, there are people who some messaging will just not reach, and there are people who are really interested in something, but yeah, they look at it and they're like, where am I in this? And so that has been true. I'm going to say this about both the Obama and the Biden administrations were very technocratic and top down. And they're not particularly consensus driven. And that is, both of them, Obama and Moore, are interested in behavior science, social science, where it can be almost applied as a technology. So, for example, they really privileged nudges and choice architecture, both of which are slightly creepy. And while they seem to give people a choice, they really are manipulative. When I was working again at ACEEE, one of my colleagues, who is a mathematician, she was like, isn't this creepy? And I was like, hell yeah, it's creepy. I'm not for this. Again, anthropologist. I'm not a sociologist. I'm not an economist. I'm not really interested in optimizing your McDonald's menu so you go for the profitable choice. That's what choice architecture does. Nudges are the same sort of thing. You do a lot of prompts and nudges and remind people. Deployed, again, appropriately with nuance, they can be wonderful, really helpful. A good example might be, you now see in hotels all the time, like maybe reuse your towel. If you're done with your towel, throw it on the floor, we'll change it out. There's a lot more information and options and that is 100% coming out of sustainable behavioral science discussions and policy building. They went to hotels and said, you're going to save money. on water, on labor, if you just encourage people to use one towel less per stay, that type of thing. But in general, what you find a lot of times is something that's a little bit more technocratic, more manipulative, more invasive, speaking to people's subconscious, not really engaging with people as thinking individuals. And I'm not a fan of that. Not sure if I've answered your question or not, but that's kind of where I land.
Yeah, no, this makes total sense. The nudging reminds me of the stuff with from my days working in tech, where there's a lot of nudging. I mean, the tech can have a lot of that on apps and things like this. I guess, yeah. What does it look like to try to build this because as an anthropologist, you are much more bottom up. You are much more try to understand what's going on from the ground and build effective ideas that make sense of what actual people are doing in their real lives. What does that look like to you, and how has it been interacting with people who might have a much more top-down mentality and trying to build something effective with them?
Well, I would say, so it's kind of funny because as I do talk at a lot of conferences and things, I've had some pretty interesting moments of engagement with people. One of which was somebody asking really huge question. I don't remember what it was, but it was just such a big question. And I was sort of like, well, get rid of capitalism? And people just erupted in applause and laughter, because it was sort of like, some of these things are, we really need to go back to the basics and be like, late modern capitalism is pretty horrific, you know what I mean? And so, private equity buying everything and, piecing it out, parting it out and selling it, and people lose jobs and we lose, products that we like, and, communities lose employers, no bueno. So sometimes the answer is as simple as, revolution, to the second part of your question is fascinating. I've only really had one person get mad at anything, and it was, I'm trying to remember the context. It was 100% at Beck, and, I know what it was. It was a guy coming from one of the utilities, I want to say near Pittsburgh. He was very much a utility guy, and we call those OWUGs, old white utility guy. And so, welcome to our jargon, OWUG. And he just does not agree that qualitative research, it has any validity whatsoever. And I was trying to explain to him the idea, first of all, that validity versus reliability. There's two different things going on when you're doing certain kinds of research. So, cultural anthropology is super valid. We're on the ground. It's empirical. It's data. It's right in front of your face. Like you said, it's actual people doing real things in their homes. We see it, we record it, and then we go home and we analyze it. That's empiricism. That's empirical. Well, he does not believe that. I don't know what he thinks happens there, but he did not agree with that at all. So I go, let's say I'm in the field, and this guy says, this guy named Fred is having an affair. So he's got two ladies, and there's drama in the community. And I'm there with my bag of popcorn, just watching this whole thing unfold, talking to his friends, talking to the wife, talking to the side chick, I get all the scoop, all the information, right? Does that mean I have the full story with quote truth? No, but it does mean that I have a lot of validity built into my reporting on this situation. I've been there. I've interviewed all of the people involved. I've interviewed people who are outside, inside. All these things. Can I recreate that? Can I go to the next field site and say, this guy named Fred, I want you to go start sleeping with another lady and see what happens so I can test my theory? No, I cannot do that. Qualitative ethnographic research is grounded, it's valid, but you can't replicate it. You can't recreate human beings doing the exact same thing, every single time. You and I have worked on surveys together, as you know, and there's a reason why most people do surveys very poorly. You and I do a great job. We really did. People do not understand how good we are. But getting a client to move past what we might call descriptive statistics, you know that's difficult. We've had problems with that. Well, OLUGs see numbers, and to them, numbers are just real in a way that human data is not real. And so I just said, the guy was not getting it. He was getting very red in the face. And he's just like, I just don't believe in any of that. And I was like, you're sitting here at the Behavior, Energy, and Climate Change Conference. I mean, literally everybody is here to talk about qualitative research. So good luck. And I do believe he left early. So that was an incident where I really had a guy who was just 100% not going to listen, not interested in learning, wanted to stick with his old way. And yeah, I felt a little bad because, I mean, I certainly didn't want him to go away. I wanted him to enjoy the conference. It's a conference dear to my heart. But I just can't be like, oh yeah, no, everything I do sucks. Yeah, and I'm wrong. You know, that's not going to happen. And I do think there's some sexism there too, by the way. I mean, to him, I look younger. He doesn't know my age, but, you know, like I said, he's an old white utility guy. I'm female. I'm small. You know, why am I sitting up there on the dais? You know, why am I authority? You know, shouldn't he be the authority because he's an old white utility guy who knows what he's talking about because he's worked for Pittsburgh Utility for 35 years. So I think there's some stuff that he needs to work out, you know, in his own life. And you know, people are like that. But that's one way in which I've encountered, you know, some anger and pushback about using qualitative research to talk about environmental things.
Yeah, this makes total sense. And I now, as a side, I'm waiting for the to read about the anthropologist who advocates, so whose social research is go to a community and start an adult situation and just see what happens. That would be the very like
anthropologist who slept around and reported on it. I can definitely give you that for your show notes.
I have read that.
I definitely know that. Yeah, that's not uncommon. I mean, to be honest, I mean, you know, I got pregnant during my field work, so what does that make me? You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I got married and pregnant, but you know what I mean? Like, so, I mean, was that the same thing? I don't know, but
well, do you know who also did that speaking of presidents, was Obama's mother.
Oh yeah, exactly. And she's an anthropologist. Yes.
Yeah, she was an anthropologist, and I don't know what she was doing in Kenya. Maybe it was not field work. Maybe it was something else. But
I think her field work was in Asia for some reason, but I thought but yeah, I don't know what she was doing there either. But yeah, I mean, I'm married to German. Yeah. So, you know, but yeah, so yeah, that is funny though. I mean, Love Island anthropology, you know, like let's start that. That could be funny. Or throw in a random anthropologist to any of these shows, you know, just have an anthropologist show up on Bravo with like what's happening with Andy Cohen, you know. Yeah. I think that could be.
My professor, my anthropology professor actually studied some reality TV shows. Oh my gosh. But I don't think he was on set. I think he did some sort of like I think it was like Desperate Housewives. It was very class-based. But fun fact, you were actually the second interview that brought up Love Island. So I don't know what's going on with this TV show, but you were the second person who has independently brought it up.
I've never watched it. Ross and I have gotten into watching The Traitors with Alan Cumming and set in Scotland. And there's a lot of reality TV show people on that, and we don't know who anybody is because we just don't watch any of that stuff. But we do watch Traitors, and so I have sort of a third way removed insight into that world, and very limited. But yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. Okay, so maybe taking us back to what we were talking about before. I guess you were talking about, so you have the current stuff that's going on with the second Trump presidency, right? You before did a lot. You talked about doing a lot at the beginning of Trump's first presidency to help prepare the community. I was going to ask, how has this time around compared with the first time around? And then I'll have another question, another comparison in a second. Now that I'm still talking, I guess I'll say it now. I'm also curious as to how, like, obviously there are multiple Republican presidents and conservative presidents. how has he compared, like, that probably do some forms of defunding and this and that, but how is this compared with, the kind of the regular, okay, we have a red,
Oh, I see what you're saying. That's a great question, and I'm going to have to go back a little bit before I can fully answer that. And I'm going to start with saying that my dad was a Republican and a smart guy, and he was really, 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 really Republican. He said he cried in a bar in Utah when Nixon resigned. Like, apparently when I was about 4 or 5, I said to him, like, "What's Watergate, Daddy?" And he's like, "It's a hotel." But my point about that is he was also like a conservationist. He definitely believed in, he liked to hunt, and his attitude was, there won't be anything to hunt if we don't take care of the natural world. My father-in-law is currently a Republican in Arizona, though, again, not a Trumper. And I think he voted for Kamala. That's at least what I heard through the grapevine. So, but my point being, he's a old school mining engineer dude, who hunts doves in the Arizona desert. And again, I think a lot of Republicans come out of that tradition, of hunting and fishing and respecting the natural world. They definitely, they want their cars. I mean, they have always been inimical to certain forms of environmental regulation, mostly because they make money from it not being regulated. But at least there's that tension between their heart and their enjoyment and understanding and connection to the natural world and the environment, and they usually have some sense of that. And I would say under Bush too. Of course, super hand in glove with the oil industry, no question, and Enron and all that jazz. But at the same time, I don't feel like they were really. They didn't try and destroy the EPA. I'm pretty sure that Nixon signed the EPA stuff. So
he did a lot of environmental legislation.
Oh yeah, calm down. Compared to what's going on, they all end up being weird though that way. Like my favorite is John Boehner. Remember John Boehner? Are you old enough to remember John Boehner? Because he was around not terribly long ago. He was the speaker, Republican, old school guy, liked to drink his wine, smoke his cigars. Apparently, Duke met with the Pope, and we don't know what happened. But he came out of that spiritually transformed, retired from Congress, and started some type of cannabis company. So they have some sort of tension there, I think, but not so much. So now we have Trump, and Trump believes in nothing but Trump. Trump was a Democrat. Trump went to the Clintons' wedding. He's known all of these people. He schmoozed all these people, but he's a hater. He's a hater, and he really just thinks that he likes destroying things that other people like because he is a malign narcissist. And so what's terrifying about this time, and also was last time, is just we had more people holding him in check last time, is that you can't you can't reason with a malign narcissist. You just can't. There's no persona in there to grasp that other people are real. That is the problem. The previous Trump administration, again, we weren't wrong. Everybody who sat down and said, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, all that stuff is happening now. The only reason it did not happen the last time was because we had people like his chief of staff, the General Milley, different people like that who really stood in. Dan Quayle, hero of the Republic, who knew? Dan Quayle is the one who convinced, Pence to not, go along with this unconstitutional coup. Dan Quayle, Mr. Potatoes, that we mocked, is the one who basically essentially helped save the Republic. So, we have, so I would say that it is really different because the person that they are all circling is very different. This person is like Asimov's the mule, although actually I think Elon Musk is the mule. I don't know which one's the mule, but it's a little bit like a John the Baptist Jesus situation. One of them's the Antichrist. One of them is the harbinger, the herald. These are crazy people, and they are criminals, and they do not believe in the Constitution. They do not share a set of cultural values. The previous administrations, for all of their flaws and faults, you can't say that Dick Cheney doesn't believe in the Constitution, because he does. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that's the truly radical difference, is that we have a cult of personality currently running this country. And prior to that, we may have had oppositional parties, but they still had a framework in common. And that framework is Gonzville.
Yeah, this is the sad part. I think the other
yeah, this is the sad part.
Yeah, I think you're right. There isn't. It's like the closest thing. It's like the second time around, it's more effective because the people are not in place to act as a brake. And maybe the other side is I see a lot. So like the first time around, people were, and this had its pros and cons, but people were very caught up in things. Like we'll say the other side was very like angry and anxious and wanting to look and all this stuff. And that has its cons because I think it fed the social media energy that ultimately played into the administration. But like now it seems like a lot of people are just burnt out. Like it's been 10 to 12 years of this guy, and it's just as like it's just done. Like
yeah.
And that can lead to a type of withdrawal too that it seems like it can also be enabling, or could have that effect in the long run, even if it's not trying to be enabling. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, oh, for sure. I know I felt it, and that's again why I took a step back for a little while. I'm still very involved in Democratic politics here in West Virginia, but I had to take a beat before that, and I know I've lost a few people. Like some people are just like, I just can't anymore. That was there was such high hopes, and people really were traumatized by the election in November, and remain so. I mean, I remember people talking about how they were crying for months in 2016, and I think this was worse in some ways. I mean, I know I said to my friend, I understand nihilism now. Like, for the first time in my life, I get it. Like, I get nihilism. And it was like, that was a bad place to be in. But, you can't stop working and fighting just because you've had a setback. And, I look at, how Black people in the United States have been treated for 400 years. And they, I can't give up. Like, look at me, I mean, I'm super privileged. And so, what am I going to do? Like, whine? Like, no. Like, it's time to, pull your bootstraps up and get back to work. So I've been doing that. And, I'm glad I would say I'm pacing myself. But I think people are withdrawn for sure. I think people are also not so much withdrawn, but waiting and seeing what's happening. So, for example, we've had some conversations like, where do you go? Like, if the bulwark, one problem we have is we have essentially a party of crazy people who don't believe in vaccines, who just crazy people. Like, you can't work with them anymore. And then everybody else is kind of crammed into this big tent right now. And there's a lot of strife because that is not, they can't run a society where 60% of people are all trying to share the same space and get the same things accomplished, because we do not have, again, that shared cultural framework, right? We're not in a party so much as we're just not that, And so people are going, what do we do? Do we start a new party? Do we glom onto parties that exist and try and shape the direction? And people don't have a lot of energy. So I think that some people are waiting and seeing and how things shake out a little bit until they make a move. And I think that's fair. I totally think that's fair. I'm not doing that, but I understand why people would do that.
Yeah, this makes total sense. I with the with what you were talking about some of the resilience in the Black community. One of the first things that makes me think about is one of my friends. So I lived in Chicago in 2016 during the start of that first term, and so I actually the church I went to, one of the kind of an older elder in the community. He gave a speech, and this was where he was very much alluding to aspects of this kind of the Black community's experience. He said, we survived Ronald Reagan, we will survive Donald Trump. It was a very we've been through other storms. We can do it, and
not everybody did survive Trump the first time. We lost 1 million people.
Yeah. Now, by a cruel irony, he did survive Trump's first term, but he actually has passed away, but for a different reason, for a medical reason. But he was an older guy, and but this is the thing. I mean, I think he was thinking about this from an overall community perspective. For him, it would be our community, but I'm not fair. This would be, the Black community more broadly. So I'm not in the R, but I'm going to say R because that's because I'm
sure he's welcoming you in if you were there to listen. Then,
right.
Yeah. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
The community will survive it. And
a community will survive it.
What?
It's a community. Somebody will survive it. We don't know what the shape of that will be. But
exactly.
Yeah.
And I also remember, I feel like this is a time, there's something you were talking about before that kind of reminds me of this, where you were people are you were sometimes kind of getting people in the environmental space. I'm trying to remember exactly how you phrase it. So I might be saying it's a bit off, but how this, people getting laid off and then getting sopped up by other companies, that this oxygenates. This was the metaphor you used. I do think this, in the long-term run, one potential positive of this is a time when the rug is pulled out. And this can be a time when people kind of go back to square one. And this is kind of emotionally what I've been seeing. And it's a hard time. It's usually a super ambiguous time. It's not a time where people are this is what I'm doing. This is the solution. I'm going to go charge. It's more of a reflective time. And it's often, but that can be super necessary. We often need to reflect on the ambiguity to get ourselves to reorient and to actually think about what a fuller picture of kind of what we were talking about in the middle, the fuller picture of what a better society might look like. Or what are your thoughts? And I'd also love to hear what you're doing as well, because you said that at the end.
What I'm doing? What was the last part?
What you're doing as well.
So I would say, so the churn oxygenates. I remember years ago talking to one of my professors as well. He was very grumpy about everything changing all the time. He's probably at the time my age now, 30 years ago. And I was just kind of change is good. Change is not all bad. And one of the funniest, so first of all, I find that the thing about living in these times that I don't know, it's makes it easier, makes it harder, is that it's also funny. Everything is so absurd. You gotta laugh. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of good. I laugh every day at something that these people are doing. That said, they're so chaotic, and this is part of fascism. I mean, this is the thing. They do this. They want to keep you all messed up and stirred up and freaking out and and that's the reason why I was just absolutely not. I was I have now what I call implacable calm. I'm good. Whatever you guys did, they burnt something out in me, but that thing, I don't miss it. Like, I feel so calm. But they are so chaotic and they're so, there's many factions and they're constantly like fighting each other. And they typically will actually fight each other before fighting other people, which is when, you see that Steve Bannon, Elon Musk are fighting each other, or, some guy in the Treasury Department is fighting, Stephen Miller, and they fight. There's a lot of internecine warfare. And also we know that Trump, he's really only responsive to the last person who put an idea in his head. And same with Elon Musk. I mean, he's got that diner now. Like, that diner is just hilarious. I mean, if you haven't followed the diner in LA situation, it is classic Elon Musk bullshit, and it's fucking hilarious. So yeah, they only go with whatever their last idea is, and then they go full bore without looking forward to it. But my point of that is, there's so much conflict that out of this, I do think some good things can grow, because they're going to accidentally do that broken clock right twice a day. And I can't unfortunately give you an example right this second, but I have seen it. Like, they are so intent on legislating people's behaviors that they're sort of accidentally coming around to some of the craziest, most left-wing ideas. You know what I mean? Like, so, Trump did do the vaccines. He wanted his name on the vaccine, so he did the vaccines. He gave people money. That's another thing where Obama and Biden fell down. Like, they should have they were sniffy about it, honestly. They were like, well, you shouldn't put his name on the checks. That's like tacky. And it's like, no, it's fucking genius. Like, you should put your goddamn name on the checks and keep them coming. Like, and they didn't. And look where we are. I don't blame everything on that, but that was an easy one. And they didn't do it, No, instead they mocked him. And it's, again, every once in a while, Trump comes up with something like, you're like, oh, interesting, okay. I mean, he reverses himself and you don't know where he's going to land in the end, but, sometimes they land on something that's not terrible. So I do think that there's a lot of, I'm not an accelerationist by any means. I would have loved to have avoided all of this, and I really worked hard in 2024. I was everywhere. I was basically a Democratic Party propagandist. I mean, I really devoted 2024 to like trying to win this. I mean, so that was depressing. But I just would say, so I'm not an accelerationist, but there is something about bringing everything crashing down. There's nowhere to go but up. And so maybe some good stuff will come out. I don't know. I mean, I don't think everybody's going to survive this. Lots of bad things are going to happen. Lots of bad things are going to happen, particularly to marginalized people. Anybody who had any struggles, those struggles are going to be worse, generally speaking. But that said, there is something for us to be saying, like, maybe push some of this back on the states. Maybe push some of this back on the communities. See what kinds of mutual aid networks we can create. I do think that there's possibilities for fluorescence to come out of all of this composting.
Yeah, this makes total sense. I hope we've hit rock bottom sometime soon, because we always seem to go a little lower than I think we can go. But yeah, what you're saying reminds me of, and like, a lot of this, it's very cybernetic to me. I mean, like, you do a lot with cybernetics. We could have a long conversation about that. But like, I was recently watching like a astronomy, like introduction to astronomy on YouTube to talk about some of the different aspects. Astronomy is fascinating. Like, stars are super fascinating. But like, one video I was watching recently talked about like multiple star systems. And so like, if you have two star systems, there's some that like the one star is huge and the other star is small. So what happens is this star bursts out in energy and it expands, and then it gives the star the energy to the other star. And so this star, and then eventually you actually get a flip where this star becomes super small and this one bursts out. And then this one starts transferring the energy to that, and they're in this cycle. And it's like this, like, weird feedback.
I gotta say, there were two malls in Tulsa, Oklahoma that had that exact relationship. And it was, every time I would go back to visit my grandparents, Springfield Mall would be the new great thing that had the cool stuff, and the other mall was like all and then like I would go back 2 years later and it was like, you know, Daisy Mall is like bing, and Springfield's all like, and it was constant, you know. So yeah, I love that, like that idea that you have this sort of, you know, setting, and people, you know, things are giving energy back and forth, and you can't always predict where it's going to land.
Right. And also at the same time, yeah, exactly. It's a weird feedback loop. You can't predict where it's going to land, but it also can produce a lot of helpful raw resources. So like these star systems, and this one, but also like supernova and all the various star systems out there, especially the really big turbulent ones that explode or get really hot, you know, like he was talking about.
That's how you get carbon. That's how you get iridium.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He was like, it produces carbon and then it explodes, or produces, and iron is another one that causes a lot of weirdness. But like the one he was talking about, produces carbon and these explode, and evidently this is where a lot of the carbon on our planet ultimately probably came from some of this. So it's destructive. But there's always hope after, and it's a bit complicated because it's all in a
destruction. Yeah.
Complicated.
Yeah, I do like Stephen Jay Gould's writings on these things. You know, and he talks a lot about things like spandrels and, you know, and various, you know, sort of fluorescent niches of where you get, you know, almost like excrescences, and then they become important niches for speciation. So I know we're, you know, going astronomy, biology, but that is cultural anthropology. So we're going to magpie steal from everybody, you know. But it is all connected. I do think. I mean, I if anybody ever really wants to buy me like a lot of liquor and sit down and record me, I will tell you all the bad stuff that will happen. But mostly, I try and focus on the positive, the generative, the creative, the hopeful. And I do think there is, when we take the long picture, which as, again, an anthropologist, and I'm an anthropologist steeped in history, I think it's fair to take that, as long as you don't diminish the human cost and the animal, you know, the creature cost, the, you know, the environmental costs along the way, because those are big. But there are big swings, you know, big curves, you know, in history. You know, you've heard of thermostatic voting, probably. You know, it all sometimes can feel very immediate and despairing and hopeless. And yet, you know, taking a step back and looking at that big picture, you realize, wow, you know, people have survived this, and they'll survive, like your community leader said, we'll survive this person, you know, life will go on. I do think it's been really instructive. Ross and I have been watching a lot of archaeology, a lot of history. We're huge Time Team fans, like going back and watching all. I used to watch Time Team back in the day. Now I'm like, I'm introducing Ross to it. And I see analogs. I see Trump really reminds me of Henry VIII, like so much. You know, when you start looking seriously at Henry VIII, you're going to see so many resonances with Trump. Some of the big Roman emperors, you know, what happened with them, like how they ruled and what the choices that they made. I mean, Rome is very, very weird. It's very, very weird. So it's not as good an analog, but there's some interesting stuff. And when we look at these historical analogs, then that also tells us what could happen and how to deal with it. You know, like it gives us information that we can potentially use in our own lives, I guess. So I would say that's another way in which I look at things, is with la longue durée, you know, as Brodel would say, is that long, you know, complex wave of action and interaction. And, you know, if you think you know where we're going to land, you are deluding yourself, because anything could happen at any time. And so, which brings me to, we still have like 15 more minutes or something. So while I'm talking about that, since you have this sort of particular kind of mind, where do you fall on the simulation hypothesis?
I guess I tend to first view it a bit almost anthropologically as like, here are some kind of weird ideas that certain people like Elon Musk. He's the first person I think of when I think of the simulation hypothesis. He's not the only one for that, but like,
I'm not sure if he believes in it anymore, though. That's a good question. I know he probably got into chat about that, but I don't know if he does believe that or not.
Right. Well, he was big on popularizing it, and I think for him, whether or not he believes in it doesn't really matter because it's useful.
Yes.
It's useful to talk about, like, and in that sense, it can fall into a type of what I will call like tech hype, because it's very tech. It's not technically tech, but it's very tech adjacent. Of like, people have incentives to propagate ideas, pretty much no matter the idea behind the validity behind it. I think that like I could try in the top of my head to like speak probabilistically, because that's typically how it's phrased, of like, this is more probable. I do think like, and I could spend a while trying to figure out where the issue is in the logic of it from that side, but like from a certain perspective, it's just like, it strikes me as a bit of it's making a type of logical jump, and like, there are all sorts of things by a similar set of logic that could be more probable, because if you basically assume an infinite expanse in time and say, oh, this stuff must develop in an infinite expanse of time, there's all sorts of things that also are probably the case. It kind of, in that sense, it kind of reminds me, maybe I'm going to get in a little bit of this is a whole other conversation, and it's a whole other debated thing, but like, you have things like the ontological argument for the existence of God, which basically says, God must exist. And I don't think that's a very good, I don't think there's much, I don't like the idea of trying to prove the existence of God. That's a whole conversation. Philosophy of religion is a whole thing. But like, there's a type of categorical jump I see it making that I think doesn't fan out. And I see a parallel. I think there's a similar type of categorical jump the argument is making. I don't know if that makes sense. From a philosophical side, that's what I would probably say.
It does, and I understand what you're saying. And so so again, being a magpie, I and just for the audience's sake and listening to this, I was raised in Baha'i with a Jewish step family, in a family that was the larger family is like I think every member of our family is a different religion. I'm not joking. Like, I think at least a different denomination. Like, my great aunt was a Christian Scientist. My uncle's Episcopalian. Like, they're all like all over the place. Not a single one of us apparently shares like the same religious, and we all get along. Like, there's no issues. My grandma liked to church hop. My grandma loved to church crawl. And she was originally Methodist, and then she married my grandfather, became Presbyterian. And at the end of her life, she was, I don't know what she was, but she was going to different churches for like really kids. So when I look at that, I'm like, I'm not religious. I'm pretty much probably an atheist, honestly, at this point, pagan, like witch, something in there. But I do borrow concepts that I think are really useful, like the concept of grace and the concept of the sin of despair. And so to me, I think we're talking about, when I think that the simulation hypothesis has some stuff going for it. It helps explain some of the ways in which things seem very surreal or seem to just not work in a way that is logical. And again, I mean, really, like, when you come across some of these mysterious blips or glitches. That said, I think too much belief in something that's predeterminative, like the simulation hypothesis, can lead one into the sin of despair, because then you kind of say, like, oh, well, there's nothing I can do. You know what I mean? It's fait accompli. I'm just stuck here on this ride, so I might not as well try. And so I definitely agree in the sense of, like, I think anytime you start to get a explanation that is too totalizing, too neat and tidy, you end up creating a box where human energy and momentum kind of slow down or are contained. So I'm not crazy about that. But Yeah, I mean, I do wonder sometimes, like, did we pop into a different timeline? And that could be a different conversation that we have, because it would be fun to have that conversation, because I have been collecting, I think they're called, are they apports? There's a word for them, and now I've forgotten what the word is. I usually know things out of time, like not anachronisms, but you know what I mean, like things that have like sort of appeared. That would be a fun conversation to do, if you watch it at some point. But again, I think where we're going with all of this is just, as individuals with agency, what are we supposed to do, right? Do we give up? Do we curl up and cry? Or do we just, pick ourselves up as best as we can and pick up our piece of the quilt and focus on what we can do, what's right in front of us, and, whatever that is, whether that's, picking up trash on a beach where you are, whether that's, I'm very pleased, I bought one of those little mason bee houses, and the mason bees are using it. I didn't really think they would. I thought it was bullshit. I thought, okay, bees don't use this. They are using it. They built little bee houses in there. Whatever you can do in your everyday life right now, I think matters. And I think that's where we should probably just leave it.
Yeah, this makes sense. I think a focus on praxis. Yeah, this could be a time for a cultivate your garden. I mean, to reference, that comes from the book of Jeremiah, where they were in exile. That was a very, everything is gone and we're just despair. And then the response was, build a garden, build a bird house. Maybe they didn't really do that one as much, but definitely
feed somebody. If you're busy feeding people, you don't have time for despair, right? Feed somebody, take care of somebody. Right. I'll add to that. I mean, we see a lot of talk about the male loneliness epidemic. You know what I don't see? I don't see a lot of men volunteering for stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it is a struggle. I was, at the American Anthropology Association on Impact. Straight, cisgender white men, really difficult to get them to do service. And so I would say, building a garden, acts of service, this is what people need to be doing right now, instead of being up their own butt. Yeah,
and a lot of psychologists show that serving, that having that sense of I'm contributing to something is one of the most significant things in people's well-being. A book like Aging Well, I think, is a very good example of that. I'll link to that below. But I think a wider thing is, I think one aspect of this type of disappointment is an emotional manifestation of this. But during times like these, I think people often think they have a certain type of agency. And then this part of the rug getting swept underneath is that they realize that the agency that they think they have isn't, as other powers that be kind of come and do other things instead. This is a time that's very emotionally hard, and that can, I think, contribute to a sense of this is a bit surreal. The place around me is a bit surreal. But also, like, you need to process that, but also you need to build your own agency in the things you can do. And that usually starts with the small things, like you said. So building a garden, literally or metaphorically, serving, doing these things in your regular life is a way to actually rebuild your agency, which is, I think, super helpful in the reconfirm your agency, which is super helpful at a time when the powers that be seem to take agency away or seem to demonstrate agency that you thought you had, but you didn't.
Yeah. I agree 100%.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess with that, thanks for taking the time to talk. I'm going to ask one final question based off of this. You built a bird thing. Have there been any small things that you have done in your community that you have found particularly fulfilling? Feeding people, bird, whatever.
Yeah. Well, I didn't build the house. I just bought it, but I put it on my house. It's like a little mini house on my house. for the bees. But yeah, I mean, I've been doing a lot, but well, two things. I mean, so I do a lot of volunteering around town, and that includes particularly, I go to the Main Street Nursing Home. We do little parties for them, and so we do like Valentine's, St. Patrick's Day, and we'll have like bingo and pizza or candy or like treats and stuff like this. We do Christmas and Halloween and the whole 9 yards, and so we come around pretty regularly. And one of my favorites has been Myrtle, who's 106 or 7 as of July 4th, and I've literally fed Myrtle now twice. The first time I was by myself giving her goldfish crackers, and I was like, shouldn't somebody be supervising me here? Like, Myrtle wants the goldfish crackers, which, she's not super communicative, but she's kind of like, taking them out of my hands. And I was kind of like, okay, I guess, hopefully Myrtle knows that she can have these. But, so yeah, in the most literal sense, I'm out there feeding a 105-year-old woman goldfish crackers.
There we go. I guess everyone should grab their...
Do I want to be 105? And I think, well, she's in bed watching TV and eating crackers. And I was like, there's something to be said for that. Like, I could live with that.
Yeah, that's not the worst life. I mean, well, like I referenced the book Aging Well, and there are many, it talks about people who are older and what factors lead to them being psychologically satisfied with their lives. And at that age, people often kind of discover, he talks about it as like a stoic or almost Buddhist phase of life where people kind of let go of who they are and get a peace as their body sometimes falls apart, and they get content in the small things. That's not everyone's experience at that age, but
Sure.
I guess the moral would be go grab some goldfish crackers and go find the myrtles in your community, because to be perfectly honest, they're there.
Yeah. Go help somebody, as much as you can. And so, yeah, I would definitely say that. Now, that said, I mean, again, I would definitely say that to men. Like, I'm a mom. I'm a mom. I've been helping, but we need men to join us in that, because women are getting real tired.
And to be honest, men need it too, because we actually get a lot of benefit from it. But yeah, thanks for taking the time, and I guess I hope you have a good rest of your evening.